All right, so let's dive into something pretty interesting today.
Okay.
You've probably heard about Ozempic and Wegovy,
Right.
these drugs that are getting so much attention for helping people lose weight.
Yeah, definitely.
But get this,
Okay.
that same drug
Mhm.
might actually help curb alcohol cravings too.
It's pretty wild.
Sounds pretty wild.
Yeah.
There's a recent study from USC that was published in JAMA Psychiatry,
Right.
and it's got everyone buzzing.
Everyone's talking about it.
So today we're going to break down exactly what it found
Okay.
and what it might mean for you.
So
Yeah.
what's really fascinating is that we're not just talking about anecdotal evidence here.
Right.
This is a solid scientific study that's starting to reveal a whole new side to this drug.
Okay, so before we get into the nitty-gritty of the study itself,
Sure.
can you remind us quickly why this is such a big deal?
So alcohol use disorder is a huge problem.
Right.
The U.S. Surgeon General has stated that alcohol is involved in a shocking number of deaths each year.
Wow.
And it contributes to a whole range of diseases.
And it's not just the physical health impact, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, alcohol use disorder affects families,
Yeah.
relationships,
Entire
communities.
Absolutely. And despite how widespread the problem is,
Yeah.
so many people who need help with alcohol use disorder don't actually seek or receive treatment.
Oh, wow.
The existing options just aren't reaching everyone who needs them.
That's where this research comes in. We've heard stories from doctors and patients about people taking semaglutide and noticing something unexpected.
Right.
They just don't feel like drinking as much.
Yeah, they just
lose the urge.
It was these anecdotal reports that actually spurred the researchers to investigate further.
Okay.
They wanted to see if there was any scientific basis to these observations.
So they designed a study to put this to the test.
Exactly. They did a randomized placebo-controlled trial,
Uh-huh.
which is the gold standard in medical research.
Okay.
They recruited 48 adults
Okay.
who had a pretty significant drinking problem,
Okay.
exceeding recommended limits, but weren't actively seeking treatment at the time.
Hold on, before we go any further.
Sure.
I just have to say, I'm picturing a lab setting.
Yeah.
And it didn't exactly scream, let loose and have a drink.
Right.
How did they create an environment where people would actually feel comfortable drinking?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
They were very intentional about creating a relaxed atmosphere.
Okay.
They set up the lab to feel more like a comfortable living room and encouraged participants to bring their favorite drinks.
Oh, wow.
They even let them choose the music.
Okay.
The idea was to observe drinking behavior in a setting that felt as natural as possible.
So what happened during these lab sessions?
Well, the experiment had two parts.
Okay.
In the first part, before any injections were given, participants were invited to drink at their own pace for a couple of hours.
Okay.
The researchers carefully tracked how much they drank and how long it took them to have their first sip.
So this was all about establishing a baseline for each person's drinking habits before starting the treatment.
Precisely. Once they had that baseline, the participants were randomly divided into two groups.
Okay.
One group received weekly injections of semaglutide,
Mm-hmm.
the same low dose you find in Ozempic.
Right.
The other group received a placebo.
Okay.
This went on for 9 weeks.
Wow.
And during that time, the researchers also kept tabs on everyone's drinking patterns outside of the lab.
That's a pretty significant chunk of time.
Yeah,
Did they just let them know about their lives, or were there any check-ins?
they definitely kept in touch with the participants throughout those 9 weeks.
Okay.
To monitor their drinking at home.
Got it.
Then after the 9 weeks were up, it was back to the lab.
Back to the lab.
Everyone repeated that initial drinking session so the researchers could compare their behavior before and after the treatment period.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
What did they find?
So
Were there any noticeable differences between the two groups?
there were some striking differences, and they were all pointing in the same direction. So the people who were on semaglutide, they reported fewer cravings for alcohol throughout the week.
Interesting.
They also drank less on average when they did choose to drink.
Okay.
And this is what it gets really interesting.
Okay.
They had significantly fewer heavy drinking days compared to the group who received the placebo.
Wow. So it's not just about wanting to drink less. It's actually impacting those heavier drinking episodes.
Right.
That can be so dangerous.
Exactly. And here's the kicker. The effects they saw, even with that low dose of semaglutide, were stronger than what's typically seen with medications, specifically designed to reduce alcohol cravings.
So we're potentially talking about a drug that was created for something completely different.
Yeah.
Outperforming current treatments for alcohol use disorder.
Yeah.
That's a game changer.
Definitely a huge development.
Huge.
So let's zoom in on those heavy drinking days for a second.
Okay.
Because they're a key indicator of how severe someone's alcohol use disorder is.
Right.
Remember, to even qualify for the study, participants had to have had at least 2 heavy drinking episodes in the month leading up to it.
Right. That was one of the criteria for being included.
Well, in the last month of the study, the group taking semaglutide had a dramatic reduction in the number of those heavy drinking days.
What kind of reduction are we talking about?
Almost 40% of them reported having no heavy drinking days at all in that final month.
Wow.
Compare that to just 20% in the placebo group.
That's a huge difference.
It's pretty remarkable.
Cutting heavy drinking episodes in half
Yeah.
could have such a significant impact on someone's life, their health, everything.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm curious, were there any other unexpected findings?
There was another observation that's worth mentioning.
Okay.
Remember how we talked about the researchers tracking everyone's drinking patterns throughout those 9 weeks?
Yeah, they wanted to see what was happening in people's everyday lives, not just in the controlled lab setting.
Well, they also kept track of cigarette use for the participants who smoked.
Okay.
And get this, the semaglutide group showed a much bigger drop in the average number of cigarettes they smoked each day compared to the placebo group.
Hold on, so this drug might have implications for reducing nicotine cravings, too.
Potentially, yeah.
It's almost like it's helping people break free from multiple vices at once.
That's certainly what the data suggests. Of course, we need more research to confirm this.
Right.
And to really understand what's happening at a biological level.
Right.
But it definitely raises the possibility that semaglutide could have a much broader role to play in addressing addiction, not just limited to alcohol.
This is getting more and more fascinating by the minute.
Yeah.
It really begs the question, what does this tell us about how addiction works in the brain?
That's a great question, and it's one that researchers are really grappling with right now.
Yeah.
If a drug like semaglutide, designed initially for diabetes and weight loss,
Right.
can have such a powerful effect on alcohol and potentially even nicotine cravings,
Yeah.
it really challenges our understanding of the underlying mechanisms of addiction.
So we might need to rethink our whole approach to addiction treatment.
Yeah, possibly.
Are we even looking at the problem the right way?
It's definitely pushing the boundaries of what we thought we knew.
Yeah.
And, this ties back to what we were saying earlier about how limited the options are for treating alcohol use disorder.
Right. You mentioned that current medications, while effective, aren't reaching everyone who needs them.
Exactly, but semaglutide is already out there being prescribed for diabetes and weight management.
Right.
If further research backs up its effectiveness and safety for treating alcohol use disorder, it could become a much more accessible option for people who are struggling.
It's almost hard to fathom the impact that could have.
Yeah.
Imagine how many lives could be changed if a readily available medication could help people cut back on drinking and avoid those dangerous heavy drinking episodes.
It's a really exciting prospect, but it's important to temper that excitement with a dose of caution.
Sure.
More research is absolutely crucial.
Of course.
We need longer-term studies to fully understand the long-term effects of semaglutide and make sure it's safe for widespread use in this context.
That makes total sense. We don't want to get ahead of ourselves and jump to conclusions before we have all the facts.
Right.
But I have to admit, the possibilities here are incredibly promising.
They certainly are, but we need to approach this with a critical eye.
Okay.
While the potential benefits are significant, it's crucial to ask, are there any potential downsides we should be considering?
What kind of downsides?
Well, for starters, we know that semaglutide has some side effects,
Okay.
primarily gastrointestinal issues like nausea and vomiting.
Right. I've heard those side effects can be quite uncomfortable for some people, although they often diminish over time.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's always the possibility of unknown long-term effects that might only emerge with more extensive research.
That's a good point. We need to be mindful of the bigger picture and make sure we're not creating new problems while trying to solve existing ones. What else should we be considering as we evaluate the potential of this drug for treating alcohol use disorder?
We also need to think about the practical aspects of widespread use.
Okay.
Semaglutide is an injectable medication,
Right.
which can be a barrier for some people.
I hadn't thought about that. Not everyone is comfortable with injections.
Yeah,
And it could also make it more challenging for people to stick to the treatment plan.
exactly. Accessibility and ease of use are key factors in determining whether a treatment will be successful in the real world.
Right.
But beyond the practical considerations,
Yeah.
this research really opens up some fundamental questions about the nature of addiction itself.
You're going back to that idea that we might not fully understand addiction?
Right, if a drug like semaglutide, which wasn't designed to treat addiction at all,
Right.
can have such a profound impact on cravings and behavior, what does that tell us about how addiction works in the brain?
Yeah.
What other assumptions might we be holding on to that need to be challenged?
It's like this study is throwing a wrench into our existing models of addiction.
It's shaking things up for sure.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so exciting.
Yeah.
This research could lead to breakthroughs not just in treating alcohol use disorder,
Right.
but in understanding the complex interplay of brain chemistry, hormones, and behavior that contribute to addiction in general.
So what you're saying is this could have implications for treating all kinds of addictions, not just alcohol.
It's definitely a possibility. Think about it. If we can figure out exactly how semaglutide is impacting those reward pathways in the brain.
Yeah.
We might be able to develop targeted therapies for a whole range of substance use disorders.
Wow.
Imagine the potential if we could apply this knowledge to help people struggling with opioid addiction, nicotine addiction, even behavioral addictions like gambling.
That would be truly revolutionary. It sounds like we're on the cusp of a major paradigm shift in how we approach addiction treatment.
It's a very exciting time to be in this field.
Yeah.
There's a real sense of momentum building as we learn more about the brain and develop new tools to address these challenging conditions.
For sure.
And, this whole conversation brings to mind a question I've been pondering.
Okay, so before we get too carried away with all the what if,
Right.
let's bring it back to the here and now. We've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
From the alarming statistics about alcohol use disorder to the unexpected potential of semaglutide.
Yeah.
But for someone listening who might be struggling with alcohol,
Yeah.
what's the key takeaway here?
I think the biggest takeaway is hope.
Okay.
This research is still in its early stages,
Right.
but the findings are incredibly encouraging.
Yeah.
The fact that a drug already being used for other conditions could be so effective in reducing cravings and heavy drinking. It's a huge step forward.
It's like a beacon of light in a field that often feels overshadowed by frustration and setbacks.
Exactly, and it underscores the importance of scientific exploration. You never know where the next breakthrough will come from.
Yeah.
In this case, a medication designed for diabetes might end up revolutionizing how we treat addiction.
It's a powerful reminder that we should never stop asking questions
Yeah.
and exploring new possibilities.
Absolutely.
So what are the next steps? What needs to happen to move this research forward
Yeah.
and potentially get this treatment into the hands of the people who need it?
The researchers themselves have been very clear
Okay.
about the need for larger, longer-term studies.
Okay.
We need to see these initial findings replicated in more diverse populations
Right.
and make sure the positive effects hold up over time.
So essentially, we need more data to confirm what we're seeing
Right.
and to fully understand the long-term implications of using semaglutide in this way.
Precisely. We also need to investigate the optimal dosing
Okay.
for treating alcohol use disorder specifically.
Mm-hmm.
This study used a relatively low dose, the same one used for diabetes management.
Right.
Higher doses might be even more effective, but we need to carefully evaluate any potential risks before we go down that road.
And of course, there are those practical considerations we talked about, like
Yeah.
the fact that it's currently an injectable medication.
Yeah,
That's not going to be ideal for everyone.
absolutely. Researchers are already exploring different ways to deliver the medication,
Okay.
like nasal sprays or patches, which could make it more accessible and appealing to a wider range of people.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
It's fascinating to think about how this one study has opened up so many avenues of inquiry.
it really has.
It's like we've stumbled onto a whole new world of possibilities for treating addiction.
It really is a watershed moment.
Yeah.
This research has the potential to change countless lives, not just for people struggling with alcohol,
Right.
but potentially for anyone battling addiction.
And that brings us back to the question you were pondering a moment ago.
Yes.
You were about to share something that's been on your mind.
It's this, we've talked about how promising semaglutide is for alcohol use disorder.
Yeah.
And we've touched on the possibility that it could help with other addictions like nicotine dependence.
Right.
But what if this is just the tip of the iceberg?
Okay.
What if we're on the verge of unlocking a completely new understanding of addiction?
Yeah.
And developing treatments that target the very root of the problem,
Okay.
regardless of the substance or behavior involved.
That's a powerful thought. We're moving beyond just managing symptoms.
Right.
And starting to look at the underlying mechanisms that drive addiction.
Exactly. Imagine a future where we have personalized therapies tailored to an individual's specific brain chemistry and genetic makeup.
Wow.
Imagine a world where we can help people not just break free from addiction, but actually rewire their brains to find pleasure and fulfillment in healthier ways.
It's a future worth striving for. And who knows, maybe our next deep dive will uncover even more groundbreaking discoveries that bring us closer to that reality. Until then, keep those questions coming and keep exploring the endlessly fascinating world of science.